Berry Gordy once said, "I didn't like Stevie Wonder's singing." That one sentence set the stage for a relationship that would change music forever. At 74, Stevie Wonder has broken a silence that lasted decades. For the first time, he is speaking openly about his complicated bond with Motown founder Berry Gordy. What Stevie reveals now uncovers hidden truths about his journey with Gordy that the world has never fully heard before. The Boy Wonder and the Man Who Saw Him First. Stevland Hardaway Judkins was a boy growing up in Detroit who could barely reach the piano keys, but when he touched them, something magical happened. He was not actually born blind. He was born 6 weeks premature, and as a result of too much oxygen pumped into his hospital incubator, developed retinopathy of prematurity, or ROP. It affects eye growth and can cause damage to the retina. Not that being blind ever made Stevie think twice about what he wanted to do and accomplish in life. In an interview in 2012, he said, "Do you know, it's funny, but I never thought of being blind as a disadvantage, and I never thought of being black as a disadvantage. I am what I am. I love me. And I don't mean that egotistically. I love that God has allowed me to take whatever it was that I had and to make something out of it." His mother noticed early that her son was different. Pots and pans became his drums, and by the time he was a child, he was already drawing attention with his harmonica. At 11 years old, he was brought to Motown's headquarters, a small house on West Grand Boulevard, known as Hitsville, USA. Ronnie White of The Miracles had heard him play and felt there was something there. He arranged for Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown, to listen. Stevie later recalled that moment vividly. "I remember thinking, can I really do this?" When I walked into Hitsville for the first time. Berry stood there, quiet, grading every note. Gordy was known for his sharp instincts. He had built Motown on finding raw talent and shaping it into stars, but Stevie was unlike anyone else who had walked through his door. The boy's harmonica playing stunned everyone. His rhythm was natural, almost impossible to teach. Yet Gordy hesitated. Stevie was still a child. His voice had not yet settled. There was a risk that once puberty came, the sound that made him special could vanish. People close to Motown later revealed that Gordy almost said no, fearing the investment might not hold. But Stevie had something else. It was not just the voice or the playing. It was the energy he carried, a confidence that even at 11 years old, he could stand in a room full of adults and make them lean in closer. Gordy decided to take the chance. It was also Berry Gordy who came up with the stage name Stevie Wonder. The name stuck, capturing both the boy's youth and the awe he inspired. Stevie was signed to Motown, and a new chapter began. For Stevie, the signing was a mixture of awe and fear. He was excited to be part of something so big, but he also felt the weight. In interviews, he has said that being so young in a world of professionals was overwhelming. He had to grow fast. "There were nights I lay awake, wondering if I belonged," he said in one conversation years later. Motown had its system. Young artists were not just thrown into recording sessions. They were trained, groomed, taught how to move, how to speak, how to carry themselves. Stevie was no exception. He went through workshops that did not always go smoothly. Some producers doubted whether the boy could handle the pace. There were sessions where the results were rough and whispers that maybe Gordy had been too quick to sign him. Stevie himself admitted that there were moments when he thought he might not make it. But each time doubt rose, he would grab the harmonica and play, and the room would quiet. Gordy saw what others could not see. He saw not only a boy, but a future, a musician who could change the sound of Motown forever. But as much as Gordy saw in Stevie, Stevie also saw parts of Gordy that few knew: the tensions, the creative sparks, the cost. Creative freedom versus creative control. Berry Gordy created a system in Motown where each track went through a quality control meeting. Executives, producers, and songwriters would sit in a room and decide if a song had the power to reach radio and sell records. If it did not pass, it was shelved. Gordy believed strongly that music should always appeal to the masses, and he pushed for sounds that were clean, catchy, and easy to remember. He once admitted, "Stevie Wonder was a harmonica player. I didn't like his singing, but I loved his harmonica playing." For Gordy, it was about shaping talent into a sound that could not fail commercially. For a young Stevie, this system was both a blessing and a cage. It gave him access to the best producers, writers, and studios in the world. Yet, as he matured, he felt restricted. Stevie wanted to explore beyond Motown's polished love songs. He had melodies in his head that broke traditional structures. He was fascinated with synthesizers and wanted to weave them into his music. He also wanted to write about issues he saw in the world around him: racism, poverty, faith, and hope. By the early 1970s, Stevie was ready to push past the formula. His albums Music of My Mind, Talking Book, and Inner Visions became turning points. He used electronic keyboards, layered rhythms, and deeply personal lyrics. These records stood apart from Motown's usual output. Gordy admired Stevie's talent, but he was cautious. Songs that dealt with politics or spirituality were not guaranteed hits. In meetings, he sometimes pushed Stevie to stick with the safe route. Stevie later recalled, "There were nights I stayed up trying to write something new, but by morning's meeting, they wanted something radio-ready. I had to fight for the soul, for the message." There were times when Gordy said no. Certain songs were set aside because they were seen as too risky or too heavy. People close to the label have spoken about tapes that never made it past the review table, not because they lacked quality, but because they did not fit Motown's brand. Stevie did not give up. Instead, he negotiated. If one song had to be cut, he would insist another experimental one stayed. That constant push and pull defined his relationship with Gordy during this period. Hidden stories reveal moments when Stevie would record songs late into the night without telling the executives, then present them after they were finished, leaving little room for edits. On other occasions, Gordy himself would step in and demand changes to lyrics that seemed too direct. There are rumors of entire arrangements that were stripped down or reworked at the last minute for commercial appeal. Stevie admitted that these moments frustrated him, but they also taught him to fight harder for his vision. The tension between Gordy's commercial instincts and Stevie's artistic hunger produced some of the most powerful music of the era. Without Gordy's system, Stevie might never have learned discipline. Those creative clashes not only shape sounds and albums, but they shape Stevie's identity and his sense of agency. Let's now explore how that journey turned personal, with loyalty, betrayal, admiration, and regrets. Loyalty, admiration, and strains in the bond. For Stevie Wonder, Berry Gordy was never just a boss. In his early years at Motown, Stevie saw him as a mentor and, at times, even a father figure. Gordy's relentless work ethic and sharp vision for music left a lasting impression. Stevie often said that Gordy's belief in creating timeless songs shaped the way he approached his own craft. He respected how Gordy demanded discipline and consistency from everyone at Motown, and that standard pushed Stevie to sharpen his skills. "I admired you," Stevie once admitted, "but sometimes I wondered if you saw me or the product." That statement captures the mix of gratitude and questioning that ran through their relationship. There was genuine appreciation. Stevie has never denied that without Gordy, his career may have never reached such heights. Motown protected him from the harshest realities of the industry. At a young age, Stevie was surrounded by lawyers, managers, and promoters who could have easily taken advantage of him. Gordy stepped in to make sure he was shielded, and that security gave Stevie the space to grow as an artist. He credited Gordy for giving him a platform, for allowing him to walk into the studio with legends like Smokey Robinson and Marvin Gaye, and for teaching him that music was not just about notes, but about connecting with people. But loyalty in Motown was complicated. Stevie gave his loyalty wholeheartedly, but it came with a cost. Behind closed doors, there were conflicts over money, royalties, and recognition. Some insiders recall disputes about how much Stevie was earning compared to the revenue his records generated. At times, Stevie felt that the contracts leaned heavily in favor of the label. There are accounts of letters and memos where he pressed for more transparency, wanting acknowledgement not only as a performer, but as a composer and producer. These struggles chipped away at the perfect image of harmony between artist and label. Another point of strain came from artistic credits. As Stevie became more hands-on with arrangements and production, he sometimes felt his input was downplayed. Gordy's protective approach, which had once felt like guidance, occasionally turned into a barrier. There were times when Stevie felt frozen out of decisions about his own music, or when Gordy intervened in ways that left him frustrated. Stevie later reflected, "Loyalty is a heavy gift. I gave it. I think he expected it. But there were times I needed more than just the platform. I needed honesty." These tensions were not always spoken about openly. Both men valued the public image of unity. Yet behind the scenes, the disagreements shaped Stevie's growing determination to take full control of his career. He still carried admiration for Gordy, but he also carried wounds from moments when he felt unheard. The bond was never broken completely, but it was tested often by the weight of expectations and the clash of business with personal trust. But despite all the tension, there were turning points, moments when Stevie Wonder realized he had to assert himself fully. Turning points and taking risks. By the early 1970s, Stevie Wonder had reached a breaking point. For years, Motown had shaped his image, selected his material, and kept him within the framework of their formula for success. This was when Stevie began to push back, taking control of his sound and his message. At just 21, he made the bold decision not to renew his contract with Motown until he was assured of greater artistic freedom. It was a gamble, but it changed everything. That risk gave birth to some of Stevie's most groundbreaking work. He began experimenting with synthesizers, collaborating with innovators like Robert Margouleff and Malcolm Cecil. Albums like Music of My Mind and Talking Book marked a dramatic shift. These records were not just about love songs. They carried deeper meaning, weaving spirituality, politics, and human emotion into every track. Songs like Superstition and You Are the Sunshine of My Life showed the world that Stevie could command both commercial appeal and creative innovation on his own terms. There were battles along the way. Motown's team, focused on radio play and crossover hits, sometimes resisted the direction Stevie wanted to take. Studio engineers recall moments when Stevie's long hours of experimentation clashed with the label's demand for fast results. One producer remembered how Gordy's quality control meetings could be tense when Stevie brought in songs with unconventional structures. But Stevie held his ground. "I had to claim the music that lived inside me, even if it meant speaking louder than the industry wanted," he later explained. The turning point became undeniable with Intervisions in 1973. Tracks like Higher Ground and Living for the City pushed social commentary into the mainstream, highlighting racism, poverty, and spirituality. Some at Motown worried these themes might alienate listeners or hurt sales. Stevie refused to compromise, insisting that the music should reflect the world he saw around him. The gamble paid off. The album became a critical and commercial triumph, earning Grammys and cementing Stevie as not just a hitmaker, but a voice of conscience. Hidden stories still surface from those years. Insiders mention that certain songs never made it past Gordy's desk, deemed too controversial or not ready for release. Stevie would sometimes record multiple versions of a track, only to see his preferred version shelved. These disputes, while frustrating, fueled his determination to keep pushing. Each risk strengthened his resolve to stand as an independent creative force. Looking back now at 74, Stevie reflects on those choices with clarity. He admits the road was not easy, but he never doubted the need to take it. "If I had not stood up then, I don't know if the music you know today would exist in the same way," he told interviewers. Even Gordy, who at first resisted, later praised Stevie for his vision, recognizing that his risks helped elevate Motown's legacy. Yet creative success and personal growth were not enough to fully settle the score. There remained hidden wounds and unspoken truths. Let's dig into those shadows. The unspoken truths. When Stevie Wonder looks back now, at 74, he admits there are chapters in his journey with Berry Gordy that remain unfinished. The music was magical, the accomplishments undeniable, but beneath the surface were moments that left scars. Stevie has spoken about how silence sometimes carried more weight than arguments. "Maybe I didn't always speak up. Maybe I held back. I wonder sometimes whether Berry knew how those things made me feel, or even why I stayed silent." That silence shaped both his career and his relationship with Gordy in ways that were never fully confronted. There were times Stevie wished he had negotiated harder. Early contracts tied him closely to Motown's system, and even though the label gave him exposure, there were financial disadvantages. Royalties and publishing rights that might have secured more independence slipped through his hands in those first years. Friends recall him later acknowledging how much more control he could have had if he had pushed back sooner, but as a teenager, he trusted the people guiding him. That trust sometimes left him at a loss when he learned how much of the business side was decided without his full knowledge. The misunderstandings extended beyond money. Gordy had his own image of Stevie, the boy wonder who became the soulful genius of Motown. But Stevie often wondered if Gordy saw the whole person behind the music. He sometimes felt Gordy thought of him as unstoppable, when in truth he had doubts and fears. The expectations placed on him meant that any hesitation looked like weakness. They rarely spoke about those vulnerabilities. Stevie later admitted that what Gordy assumed and what he truly felt were often worlds apart. There were also apologies left unsaid, letters written and never sent, conversations rehearsed but never spoken. Stevie has confessed in interviews that at certain points he wanted to tell Gordy how a decision or intervention had hurt him. Yet he chose silence, fearing that honesty might damage the fragile balance of respect between them. In some cases, that silence grew heavier with time. At 74, when asked whether he forgives Gordy, Stevie's words are measured. He acknowledges both admiration and disappointment. He reflects on loyalty, opportunity, and the cost of not speaking out more often. Forgiveness, he suggests, is a process, not a single moment. I don't know if I said everything I should have, but I know what we created will always be greater than what we left unsaid. Stevie also drops details many don't know. Truths that challenge official versions. What follows is what was hidden until now. The things we never knew. As Stevie Wonder reflects, the story of his relationship with Berry Gordy carries not just triumphs, but secrets that were rarely spoken outside the walls of Motown. For every public success, there were private moments that shaped their bond in ways fans never saw. One such moment came during a tour in the late 1960s. A backup singer recalls Stevie sitting backstage after a performance, exhausted and frustrated because he wanted to add a new experimental piece to the setlist. Gordy had reportedly said no, fearing the audience would not connect with it. The singer remembered Stevie's quiet words, "One day, they will hear it." That song later became part of an album that transformed his career. It was one of the first signs that Stevie was ready to chart his own path, even if it meant pushing back against Gordy's wishes. There were also recording sessions where tension ran high. A studio engineer once shared that after Stevie laid down an early version of "Living for the City," Gordy privately called to question whether the political message was too strong. The engineer said Stevie listened respectfully, but kept the track as it was. That decision not only won him a Grammy, but also marked a defining statement about his willingness to take risks. Insiders suggest there were heated negotiations about publishing rights, and at least once Stevie nearly walked away from Motown altogether. Gordy, realizing what was at stake, personally stepped in to renegotiate. The compromise kept Stevie at Motown, but also gave him more freedom to own his music, a rare concession at the time. The personal revelations are perhaps the most moving. Those close to Stevie say he often wondered about Gordy's true motivations. Was it purely business, or was there genuine care behind the decisions? For his part, Gordy has been quoted saying Stevie's ambition both inspired him and scared him. He was always steps ahead, Gordy admitted once. That mix of admiration and unease defined much of their dynamic. Stevie himself credits Gordy for giving him a platform, but he also recognizes the cost of that loyalty. His reflection now is less about blame and more about legacy. "What I want people to know," Stevie said in a recent interview, "is that Berry believed in me when many didn't. Whatever else happened, that belief gave me my beginning." As a final word, Stevie offers advice to young artists. Claim your independence early, respect the ones who help you, but never let anyone silence the music within you. At 74, he speaks not just as a legend, but as someone who understands the complexity of gratitude and struggle. Legacy for the music, for Motown, for the culture. When the story of Stevie Wonder and Berry Gordy is told, it is impossible to separate the music from the relationship that fueled it. Together, they shaped not just the Motown sound, but the way popular music would evolve for generations. Their bond, marked by loyalty, conflict, and growth, created a legacy that is still alive in every corner of soul. R&B, and pop. From Stevie, young musicians learn the importance of owning their voice. He showed that it is possible to be more than just an entertainer. He used music as a tool for storytelling, activism, and healing by insisting on writing his own songs, experimenting with new instruments, and speaking openly about social issues. Stevie taught artists that they do not have to fit into a mold to succeed. His message is clear: if the music inside you does not sound like what the world expects, it is worth fighting to make it heard. From Berry Gordy, musicians inherit the value of vision and discipline. He created Motown not only as a label, but as a system where artists were trained, polished, and prepared to face the world stage. His emphasis on quality control, presentation, and professionalism gave Motown artists a foundation that many still look up to today. Young musicians can see in Gordy's story the necessity of balancing creativity with business. He proved that talent alone is not enough. Structure and strategy are just as important in making art last. Together, Stevie and Gordy left a combined lesson about balance. Gordy taught the importance of reaching an audience, while Stevie showed the need to stay true to one's vision. For young artists, that balance remains the challenge. How to create music that is authentic while still connecting broadly. Their story reminds new generations that compromise does not mean losing yourself, but it does mean learning when to bend and when to stand firm. They also left behind a cultural legacy. Many younger musicians, from Alicia Keys to Bruno Mars, have spoken about how Stevie Wonder's catalog inspires their own songwriting. Meanwhile, Gordy's Motown system continues to be studied as one of the most successful music business models in history. Their impact is not just in the songs, but in the way artists and labels think about music's role in society. They left an example of resilience. Stevie overcame blindness, doubts, and industry roadblocks. Gordy overcame poverty, skepticism, and racial barriers in the business world. For young musicians, their journeys prove that obstacles do not define you. What defines you is how you respond, how you keep going, and how you let your art tell your truth. What they left for young musicians is not only a catalog of songs, but a way of thinking about music as power. Power to move hearts, power to break barriers, and power to change the world. What are your thoughts on Stevie's reflections and the way he remembers Berry Gordy? Share your thoughts in the comments below.